We are living in an age of disruption, of uncertainty, where human security is at risk simultaneously from a number of threats. This is a time where we are being threatened by rising authoritarianism, by military aggression, by generative AI, and environmental threats. So how critical in this chaotic world are credible partnerships, progressive leadership, and technology and innovation? To discuss that, I have today the director of Hoover Institute, Dr. Condoleezza Rice, and USISPF chairperson, Mr. John Chambers. Dr. Rice, I want to start with you. And we'll start with the concept of partnerships. So a lot of people say that the India-US partnership is a natural partnership between the oldest and the biggest democracies of the world. But many also say that they have only come closer together because of who they stand against. How would you analyze the relationship between India and the US?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thanks to everyone for being here. It's a really terrific gathering, and I think it just speaks to the fact that there is so much that we can do together positively that does not just have to do with the challenges of the Indo-Pacific, principally the challenge from China. And I would put it this way. I was secretary when we signed the civil nuclear agreement with India. And the whole purpose of that, which George W. Bush had been determined about from the very first time from when he was elected, was to fully leverage the fact that you had these two democracies, the largest and the oldest, that we had many people who had already been a part of each other's innovation. I tell folks that one reason George W. Bush was so interested in this was he knew what the India diaspora was doing in Austin, Texas, where he was governor. And so, yes, we have a challenge in the Indo-Pacific from China, but that isn't really the most important part of the story. The most important part of the story is leveraging the tremendous possibilities in innovation and technology. Everybody respects the Indian technology and the university system in India. Everybody respects India's engineers. The Silicon Valley benefits so much from the talent that India has brought to our shores. And so I think leveraging that in our own defense, but also to make life better for our people, when you think about the possibilities in energy, in dealing with the problems, the challenge of climate change, and when you think of training the next generation of those who in these democracies will be able to meet the challenges that you spoke about, these transformational technologies like AI and the like. So I'm I think this is an enormously important relationship, perhaps the most important relationship, not just for world security, but for world prosperity.
John Chambers, when did you become a believer in this relationship?
Well, I've been the biggest bull on India, as most of you know in this room, for decades. You could see the opportunity of two countries who think alike in creativity and innovation coming together. And it's like many things in life, destiny is something that gives you opportunities to go after, but if you aren't prepared to go after it, you miss that window for destiny. I think it will not just be the defining relationship for the next century. I think it will be one that determines the pace of innovation for the world, the inclusiveness in that innovation. And we defined from the beginning, not in a defensive term at all, but how our relationship could change the standard of living of every person in India and all 29 states, every person in the U.S. and all 50 states, how it could be done across the board in terms of innovation, solving issues on healthcare, the issues of pandemics, the ability to really think about productivity. And at the heart of innovation is something that has not occurred before. It is technology-driven. And that technology allows us to move with speeds we've never seen before, Condi. Yes. And with that, I used to say the internet was 3 times the speed of change beforehand. With AI and the world digitization, it is 5 times that speed. So when you think about the comments that you watched today, I'm going to challenge the group. While the progress in terms of our defense relationship has been dramatic in just 15 months, and something that I didn't think was possible, Candy, going back 3 or 4 years with any country. It's the depth and breadth of our interrelationships. And it's the partnership that we bring, which many people may not be aware of the data here from the U.S. side. But what is the fastest growing IPO market in the world? India. 17% of IPOs, up 5x what it was just 5 years ago. And as Condi mentioned, and Mahaj, you mentioned too, many of the great technology company startups and large companies in the U.S. are led by India diaspora. So our ability to innovate around AI is key, and I'll talk about it later if you give me a shot at it, that the speed of that AI, you can do something in 12 to 18 months that used to take you 5 years for the best startups.
I just want to add that we have a lot to learn from each other, so I'll just tell you a little vignette. So I was in New Delhi in February of 2022, and of course the Indian biometric program is really the envy of the world. And so we were talking about how India had used their biometric ID for the citizens to manage COVID. So if you go and it's not time for your shot, then your biometric ID will tell you that. Well, I held up my tattered little card, my little card that the United States issues, and I said, here's how a really sophisticated country did it. And so we have a lot to learn from each other in terms of technology.
Completely agree.
But we are doing all these learnings amidst a geopolitical situation which has its own stresses on bilateral ties. In India and the US partnership, for instance, I'll cite an example. Prime Minister Modi was here for a state visit last year. He's going to be here later this month for the Quad Summit. But in between this, he's been to Russia, and then he went to Ukraine as well. Amidst this landscape, how is the balancing done?
We in the United States, I think, have to recognize that countries wish to have what I think India calls strategic autonomy. I have no problem with that. I believe that our deep interest, not just our values, which are deep, but our interest will ultimately lead to stronger partnership between India and the United States. A visit to Russia doesn't really, to my mind, change the fact that I doubt very much that ultimately India will want to be dependent on that Russian junk that they call military equipment that is failing so badly in Ukraine. I also think that Prime Minister Modi probably fully understands that the strategic relationship, the relationship without limits between Xi Jinping and Putin is a challenge to India's interest. And so I don't worry too much about the deepening of India-Russia ties. There's a history there. And this is something that I think we here in the United States can do more about. One of the reasons that India continues to have the defense relationship with Russia that it does is because we've been slow in the United States, in the Pentagon, to fully leverage the opportunity with India because we have a number of constraints still in terms of end user and so forth. And so we have work to do in the United States to make sure that India can fully leverage the defense relationship. But if I look at joint exercises going all the way back to when I was National Security Advisor in the humanitarian response to the tsunami, between India, Japan, the United States, and Australia, I think you see the possibilities there. So there's work to do on both sides. But I don't worry too much about the India-Russia relationship. And maybe we here in the United States can get a little bit away from loyalty tests every 5 minutes about who's meeting with whom.
John Chambers, on the same trend of defense, the defense minister, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh was here in America about 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And the two sides signed two important agreements, one of them being SOSA, where there can be on priority exchange of defense equipment. It's non-binding, but is this a way of weaning India away from Russia? And then how do you also see the play of technology? Because there is a lot of talk about interoperability of equipment, of military defense systems, and also technology playing a critical role in defense. Now, it's not an old world where traditional weapons were what was used.
All right, so 4 questions that I saw. In terms of the sequence, I think it's important this audience focus on the 90% issues that are driven in the relationship, which are all positive. We're going to change the world together. We're going to cure cancer together. We're going to be able to usher in an era of prosperity where the standard of living of every person in India increases faster than anywhere else in the world. And the U.S. will benefit that the standard of living of every person in America will increase dramatically faster than it would have if this relationship not taken place. Secondly, this is a time period where you disrupt. And to get sidetracked on disruptions, that will not bring our countries further apart. Prime Minister Modi, as I said, almost after he got elected, will be one of the top leaders in the world. He clearly is that now. And in that role, he has to have relationships with everyone around the world. And will there be bumps? Of course there will. But going back to the bigger issue, we can work together as a speed together if we set aggressive goals. And I want to give you a feeling for speed, and then you know where I'm going to go with this. To the audience today, we aren't moving fast enough. We've made accomplishments. This is our 3rd meeting in 15 months since the Modi state visit. And the progress has been something, Condi, that I didn't think I would see, not just between governments, between startups and VCs. But what is different in the last 15 months? The speed. A startup today to become a unicorn, 2 years to develop your product, a year to get 7 to 10 references, $1 million run rate, 2 years to get to $5 million run rate, you're a unicorn on your way. Today you develop the product in 1 to 2 months. You get your references the next quarter. You're at $1 million run rate in 2 quarters, and you're at $5 million in 12 to 18 months. Now, that disrupts every large company in the world and every country. The same thing's going to happen on defense, how fast we have to move in cybersecurity, how we're going to use AI for capabilities. So as we think about this, our 2 countries together can move with the speed between the IITs and the great institutions like Stanford and others around the U.S. that spawn this area of startups. And I think it's very appropriate today we're here and where startups really were growing out of Stanford. And Condi, you saw that more than almost anyone else. So my real message here, we've got to dream bigger. And while we move faster than anybody thought we could move, you're not going to see anything yet in terms of the opportunity. And if we do it right, the whole world will benefit. Will the U.S. and India benefit more by working much closer together? Yes, we will. But I think we see something that is now deeply intertwined. It's one of the few things Republicans and Democrats agree upon, is the importance of this relationship between our people together.
Continuing with technology, which is a very important binding factor for the U.S. and India, Dr. Issa, if we look at some of your recent interviews and essays, you've spoken about how this is not a Cold War redux. This could be graver because China has leverage on technology, as well as it's well integrated in the global systems, supply chains. In this context, are we looking at a challenge which is much bigger than what it could have otherwise been because of the technology angle added to it?
No, it's fundamentally different, not just because technology has been added, but because in the Cold War, the Soviet Union was a military giant, but it was a technological and economic midget. And it was absolutely not integrated into the international system. Only about 1% of Soviet GDP was ever accounted for in terms of international trade. So it was a self-isolating country, did not want to be a part of the international system, and basically except for oil and gas and for grain, it did not participate in the international system. And so China is very different. At our own behest, we invited China into the international economic order. China then leveraged its position in the international economic order to not only strengthen its economy, but to strengthen its hold on technology. We can sometimes talk about how that happened, some of it through IP theft, some of it through leveraging our openness as universities and the like. And so China is now a real technology challenge. I'm delighted to have another democracy on our side in the technology work ahead of us, because I will say this: these technologies, whether you're talking about AI or synthetic biology, if you think AI can be a little scary, go talk to the people who do bioengineering and synthetic biology. And so robotics, China being a major player in robotics, China being a major player in battery technology. So across the board, if you think about those technologies, particularly ones that are at the frontier and have a little bit of have a considerable potential downside, I trust democracies with this far more than I do authoritarians. I can guarantee you that in democracies we will have parliamentary and congressional hearings. We will have investigative reporting. We will have debates about what generative AI will mean, let alone what AGI will mean. In China, you will have none of that. They will do what they did with COVID. They will obfuscate what's going on. They will lie about what's going on. And what we have to be very careful of is that we keep running as fast as we can. Because right now, everybody is talking about the fact that there's certain things you can't do in China, generative AI being one of them, because they can't get the NVIDIA chip. But it won't be long before they figure it out. And so our plan has to be to run as fast as we possibly can. And I think we run faster together, India and the United States, than we run alone. And I would add to that, for instance, the British, who have a huge impact in terms of AI. Europe, not so much. And that's really rather a sad story. Europe has become the regulator, but not the innovator. And that is going to be something of a problem. I would just make one other point. India and the United States, and to a certain extent Great Britain, have something else in common, which is that our university systems, the IITs in India, Oxford in Great Britain, Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, Illinois, et cetera, here, are engines of not just producing talent, which they are, but also producing innovation. And that is something that gives us a leg up as well. So we need to leverage those university relationships as well.
You know, if I may key off of that one, and Condi and I think a lot alike, she's smarter than me, but I can usually figure out how to get to the path. If you watch what has occurred, China should have been the largest economy in the world. They have missed the window. That's right. They should have been the country leading innovation, and candidly, 5 years ago, they were. And the U.S. and India and other parts of the world were not keeping up. They stayed with the philosophy of a top-down mentality, where innovation doesn't work that way anymore with the 14th five-year plan. Yes. And innovation only works when you empower people. And even though in Silicon Valley we have a lot of different personalities, it is that diversification that allows us to move with a speed that is very unique. And that's what's different for the defense industry. If you all think about how you do defense, if you're not tying yourself closely to these startups, and if you're not saying how do we fund those and how do we grow faster, you're not going to get the innovation that allows us to stay on top. And China used to lead in GDP growth. I think the numbers the last 5 years have been like minus, in terms of market movement for their public markets, yes. Negative 3%. India has led for the last 5 years. And so we have a chance using startups of U.S. India together. And it's more than just cooperation. Out of my 20 startups, half of them are led by Indian diaspora. Most of the startups that I know have half their operations in India and half of them in the U.S. So this is embedded in the fabric of what allows currency for leaders or for companies to occur. Track record has been amazing, especially the last 5 years. The relationships across the board, and you look around this room in the defense industry as an example, have been tremendous at all levels. And there's a trust. You can't move with speed without trust. This is why this is going to be the defining partnership of the world. But we've got to not be comfortable with this. We almost blew it. We're now regaining. And now we've got to accelerate and pull away for the benefit of the whole world. How many people think that's a dream we can make happen? How many of you really think we can? We got to believe it, and we got to dream bigger.
Yeah. If I could just add one other thing. The Chinese have a huge demographic problem, of course, and India is on the right side of the demography. If it can simply train its people and educate its people, India is going to have a tremendous advantage, which we actually in the United States do not have, particularly if we don't get our immigration policies right, which right now we are not in a good place on immigration. The second point that I would make is, John mentioned China's top-down. We have to be very careful in the United States and in India that we don't get more top-down than we need to be. And there I think about the role of regulation from the government. One of the things that we're doing at the Hoover Institution just across the way here is we have something called the Stanford Emerging Technology Review. And that's to demystify some of these frontier technologies like AI and synthetic biology for policymakers, so that they are not in a mode of thinking, oh, there's so much danger here. We have to regulate, we have to regulate, we have to regulate, because regulators will regulate even if they don't understand what they're regulating.
Yes.
And so we have to be very careful about what our policies are, what's the proper role of government in unleashing the tremendous innovation that we see both in the United States and India from the bottom up. I call it distributed innovation. The Chinese innovation is very top-down.
Yes, it is.
And they even became fearful of things like online education. China once led the world in online education startups, and they just shut it down because they couldn't control it. And so that's the way authoritarians work. We just have to make sure that we learn the lesson that whenever we've tried to be top-down, we've not done very well. Read solar power. Whenever we have allowed innovation to flourish across this entire ecosystem, we've done extremely well.
And also, in fairness, we in the technology industry have to be aware that part of our goal has to be doing what's right for society.
Yes.
If we ignore what is right for society, we will get regulated and we would deserve it.
That's right.
And so we've got to do a little bit better job. And so far on AI, it's been a pretty open
story.
approach.
It's a good story.
So how do both of you see the overarching ISET agreement between India and the United States, which is on critical and emerging technologies? Do you think that that could have far-reaching consequences for the partnership, bringing the two countries closer on this critical aspect?
I think it isn't just about our countries, our startups, the VC worlds, the governments working toward a common goal in a fashion that hasn't been done before. It's based upon trust and build those relationships where you can move with the speed of 5 years in one. And we have that in a way that no other country or other relationship in the world exists. So this is where I think we have to dream bigger. And yes, I think we need to move much faster.
And I think we need to move faster. And I think we need to remember that at the center of innovation, there's always people.
Yes.
And, you can name the great names of innovators in India. You can name the great names of innovators in the United States. And, somebody has an idea, right? And before you know it, it's changed the way that we live and the way that we think. And so that to me means that we need to pay more attention to the human capital and to the potential for interaction between our people. So whether it is more in the way of student exchanges, I've been singing the song here at Stanford. We sent a bunch of kids to China. Huge number of kids to China. We should have been sending many, many more of them to India. And now maybe with the difficulty of being in China, we will see that. And I would love to see Indian undergraduates and Indian graduate students more in our labs and more in our classrooms. We opened up to China in ways that were extraordinary. And it's still the policy that I would have followed. But there was a downside, which was we opened up to a country that did not share our values. We assumed that their values would start to change by interaction with us. That did not happen. This time with India, we don't have to worry about sharing the values. And so let's be as open as possible to every level of human capital. And I think that will serve us well as also in terms of the acceleration.
But Dr. Rice, is this relationship totally bipartisan as far as the U.S. administration is concerned, or in the next couple of months, should India be ready for tackling any sort of change if possible, if it happens?
I think it's bipartisan. And not only is it bipartisan, I think it has survived several changes of administration. So starting with the Clinton administration that had certain declarations about the importance of the relationship, with pride of place, I think we took it to a different level. And I see David Mulford out there, who was a big part of that. But that was continued by the Obama administration, and then by the Trump administration, and then by the Biden administration. And so I think it's not only bipartisan, it's enduring. And one of the problems in American politics is that every new president comes to power saying, on day one, I will reverse everything that they just did. Well, first of all, they don't, because on day one, you won't. Trust me, it's much harder than that. But you aren't going to hear that about the U.S.-India relationship. You're going to hear from whoever occupies the White House in January that this is one of the most important, if not the most important relationships. And I would just add one other thing. The relationship's also deepening with some of America's strongest partners. So Australia, for instance, Japan, on the other hand. And so that's another piece of what I would call a kind of network of democracies that are taking on, to start where you started, taking on the challenge of China, but also taking on the opportunity of cooperation, particularly in this area of technology.
And does it speak to you the fact, on a lighter note, that this time there's an India influence which is quite visible in the U.S. elections, from Kamala Harris to the spouse of
Yes, well, we
Vance?
do in Vice President Harris have a connection. I might just mention we had a connection in Nikki Haley as well, which just shows maybe the United States is finally recognizing how important that is.
John Chambers, we are seeing a trajectory which is on an upward swing in the relationship between US and India, but the trajectories also need to be extremely stable for future partnerships. Do you see that stability in the relationship? And if you do see that stability, what is it based on?
I think many people may not have realized how stable the relationship already is, even down to remote parts of this country being very committed to a partnership with India and innovation. And in the defense industry, as an example, part of the stability, I only have 20 small startups in my portfolio, 9 are unicorns, but you have the very top deepfake capability of Pindrop. You have the very top secure communications with what Provoro is doing, where you can take phones now into the individual, very secure locations in the world and around the world on it. You have companies like Rubrik that can recover after not just ransomware, but after direct attacks on it in terms of the direction. So you're suddenly seeing startups move in a different way. And it comes all the way into the fabric of a state like West Virginia, where because of these relationships, you suddenly see the state attracting 6 individual major corporate billion-dollar type projects into the state in 2.5 years, where we used to maybe get 1 every 20 years. Speed of innovation. You suddenly see startups spring, and after the Stanford model that we modeled after Stanford and the IITs, in West Virginia University with 65 of them. You see a state move from number 45 to 50 in most all categories to the top 10 in every categories. And we have our delegations going to India in 2 weeks, talking about universities, pharmaceuticals, what we could do closer together. So this brings it home to everyone. And the trust is there with the relationships and the track record.
Yes. We have the last 4 minutes left, so closing comments from both of you. First of all, to you, Dr. Rice. If you could point out, say, two examples or just ideas or thoughts where India and US could build a better partnership and could improve, and one where you see tremendous growth going forward.
Yes. Well, if obviously we're here talking about national security, that's my field, and I just think there's endless possibility in the national security field, in interoperability, in cooperative arrangements between our militaries and training and the like, and I think we just shouldn't lose sight of how important that is. And I mentioned Australia and others. I say to my Indian counterparts sometimes, I know we can be a little bit slow because the Pentagon can be a little bit slow. Sorry about that, a little bit slow. If you want to buy Team Blue from Australia or others, I'm happy with that too. So I think there's a lot of work that we can do on the defense capability side. To John's point, and he made a point about making lives better for our people, I do think that the potential on the side of education, we both have huge populations that have been left out of the technological revolution. There are corners of India and there are corners of the United States where people don't feel that they have real opportunity. And so education is an area that we know these technologies are going to make a big difference, and I would love to see that, and that goes, of course, also with healthcare. So while we're doing the defense work, while we're doing the work on energy and climate change and the like, let's not forget that the real strength of this relationship is going to be in the enduring relationships between our people, and demonstrating that in West Virginia or in Alabama, my home state,
yes.
That this relationship will matter for people who really got left out. I think we could do a lot more there.
John Chambers, an area where you see tremendous growth in the next 10 years, and one area where you think, again, there could be much more that can be done.
Well, I think we've hit on a lot of the positives. I'd like to challenge us. I don't think we realize that while we move faster in both countries than any two democracies in the world, it is so slow compared to how quick AI is going to change our lives. It takes a startup usually 12 years to get enough traction to sell in the Department of Defense, even though everybody's agreeing what they do. And they come close to going bankrupt 2 and 3 and 4 times. So we have to speed up that process and think what we could do if we could do it with the Indian startups, the American startups working together with both defense departments in terms of speed. The second thing is, given our trust on this, I'd like to see us do something radical in this area, and I know there's discussion now about sovereign wealth funds and the ability to really focus from a defense with a sovereign wealth fund, from a new emerging technology with a sovereign wealth fund, and areas such as energy and national security on that. And I'd like to see us move more aggressively. And one less plug from my home state, which I will do shamelessly. They had a sovereign wealth fund for this purpose 5 years ago. So we need to be moving. But I think it's speed of change that we have to do. And it's the people in this room, virtually, that I think can lead that, especially in the area of defense as a model. Our future depends upon doing that well.
Just on time. Many thanks, both of you, Dr. Condoleezza Rice and John Chambers. Thank you.
Thank you.